Welcome to the world of science fiction where extraordinary tales come to life. Enjoy the journey. The spaceship Starhawk shuddered violently as warning alarms blared through the corridors. Captain Lyanna Kerr gripped the control panel, her knuckles white. "Brace for impact," she shouted over the chaos. The ship had been caught in a cosmic storm, its systems failing one by one. Beside her, Vryn, the Syrian scientist, remained eerily calm, his silver eyes scanning the data screens. The crash was brutal. Metal screamed as the Starhawk tore through the atmosphere of an uncharted planet, finally skidding to a stop in a valley of jagged rocks. Smoke filled the air. Lyanna coughed, pushing debris off herself. "Vryn, are you alive?" A low hum answered her. "I am functional," Vryn replied, his voice smooth but strained. His blue-tinged skin was marred by cuts, but he stood tall, his elongated fingers adjusting a damaged wrist device. Lyanna surveyed the wreckage. No other survivors, just them, and an unknown world. As they salvaged supplies, tension simmered. Humans and Syrians had been at odds for decades, their species distrustful of each other. Yet here they were, forced to rely on one another. Night fell, and the planet's twin moons cast an eerie glow. Lyanna built a fire while Vryn scanned the environment. "The atmosphere is breathable, but the temperature drops drastically after dark," he noted. Lyanna sighed. "We need shelter. Tomorrow, we search for water." Vryn tilted his head, studying her. "You are afraid." She stiffened. "I'm cautious. There's a difference." He didn't argue. But as the fire crackled, Lyanna couldn't shake the thought. What if we never get off this planet? The twin suns of the unnamed planet rose slowly, casting long shadows over the wreckage of the Starhawk. Lyanna stretched, her muscles stiff from sleeping on the hard ground. She glanced over at Vryn, who was already awake, his silver eyes scanning the horizon with quiet intensity. "We should move soon," she said, rubbing her arms against the morning chill. "If we're going to find water, we need to cover as much ground as possible before midday." Vryn nodded. "Agreed. My scans indicate a possible water source 3 kilometers northeast." Lyanna raised an eyebrow. "You can scan that far." He tapped the device on his wrist, though it flickered weakly, partially functional, enough to be useful. They packed what little supplies they had, ration bars, a medkit, and a salvaged plasma cutter, and set off. The terrain was rough, jagged rocks, and strange, twisted plants that seemed to pulse faintly in the sunlight. Lyanna kept her guard up, her hand resting near the plasma pistol at her hip. As they walked, Vryn suddenly stopped, his head tilting slightly. "Do you hear that?" Lyanna strained her ears. At first, there was nothing but the wind. Then, a faint, rhythmic trickling. "Water," she breathed. They followed the sound, pushing through thick, vine-like foliage until they reached a small, crystal-clear stream. Lyanna dropped to her knees, cupping the water in her hands and drinking greedily. It was cold and pure, the best thing she'd tasted in days. Vryn knelt beside her, but instead of drinking, he dipped his fingers into the water, watching as tiny bioluminescent organisms scattered from his touch. "Fascinating," he murmured. Lyanna frowned. "You're not drinking." He glanced at her. "Syrians absorb moisture through our skin. Drinking is unnecessary." She blinked. "Right. Alien." A small smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth, the closest thing to a smile she'd seen from him. They refilled their canteens and pressed on, following the stream downstream in hopes of finding a better shelter. The farther they went, the more the landscape changed. The twisted plants gave way to towering, fern-like trees, their broad leaves filtering the sunlight into shifting patterns on the ground. Then, without warning, the ground beneath Lyanna's feet gave way. She barely had time to cry out before she was sliding down a steep, muddy slope, rocks and roots scraping against her. She landed hard at the bottom, gasping for breath. "Lyanna," Vrin's voice was sharp with something she hadn't heard before, concern. She groaned, sitting up. I'm okay. Just bruised. He was beside her in an instant, his long fingers gently checking her for injuries. His touch was cool, almost electric against her skin. When his hand brushed her arm, she shivered. Vrin paused. Why do you do that? Do what? Shiver when I touch you. Lyanna swallowed. It's just a human thing. He studied her, his gaze too knowing. I see. Before she could respond, a low growl echoed through the trees. Both of them froze. Something moved in the shadows. A creature, sleek and predator-fast, its 6 eyes glinting in the dim light. Lyanna slowly reached for her plasma pistol. Vrin. I see it, he said softly. The creature lunged. Lyanna fired. The shot went wide, scorching the ground. The creature hissed, recoiling, but it wasn't retreating. It circled them, muscles coiled. Vrin stepped in front of Lyanna, his stance protective. Stay behind me. She wanted to argue, but then his skin began to change, shimmering, shifting into a darker, almost metallic hue. The creature hesitated, confused. Vrin let out a sound, a deep, resonating hum that vibrated through the air. The creature's ears flattened. Then, with a final snarl, it turned and fled. Lyanna stared at him. What the hell was that? Xyrian defense mechanism, he said, his skin returning to its usual blue. We can manipulate our bioelectric field to deter predators. She exhaled sharply. Handy. They stood there for a moment, the adrenaline slowly fading. Then, without thinking, Lyanna reached out and gripped his arm. Thanks. For, you know. Vrin looked down at her hand, then back at her face. His expression was unreadable. We should keep moving. But as they walked, Lyanna couldn't shake the feeling that something between them had shifted. And she wasn't sure if that was a good thing. The cave was a welcome relief from the planet's harsh winds. Lyanna crouched near the entrance, igniting a small fire with the last of her spark gel. The flames flickered, casting dancing shadows against the smooth, almost glass-like walls of the cavern. Vrin stood further inside, running his hands along strange carvings etched into the stone. These markings, they're not natural, he murmured. Lyanna frowned. You think someone else was here? Or something. A chill ran down her spine. She pulled her jacket tighter. Great, just what we need. Alien cave art from a civilization that's probably extinct. Vrin didn't answer. His fingers traced a particular symbol, a spiral with jagged lines cutting through it. His expression darkened. Lyanna watched him. You recognize it? He hesitated. No. She knew he was lying. But before she could press him, exhaustion dragged at her. The crash, the trek, the near-death encounter with that creature. It all crashed down at once. She sank onto the ground, her back against the cave wall. We should rest. Tomorrow, we'll figure out what these markings mean. Vrin finally turned away from the carvings. Agreed. They divided the night into shifts. Lyanna took first watch, staring into the fire while Vrin sat across from her, his eyes closed in what she assumed was some kind of alien meditation. The silence stretched, heavy and thick. Then, as the fire dimmed, she heard it. A whisper. Not from Vrin. Not from the wind. It came from inside the cave. Lyanna stiffened, her hand drifting to her weapon. Vrin. His eyes snapped open. Did you hear that? She breathed. He tilted his head, listening. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, you are not alone. The voice was hollow, echoing as if spoken from a great distance. Lyanna's pulse spiked. Okay, that was definitely not my imagination. Vrin stood slowly, his gaze locked on the darkness deeper in the cave. We should leave. Are you kidding? After hearing that, she grabbed a torch, thrusting it into the fire. We're checking it out. Lyanna. She was already moving. The cave narrowed as she ventured further in, the air growing colder. The carvings became more frequent, more intricate. Some depicted figures with elongated limbs, beams that looked eerily like Vrin's species. Others showed something else, something monstrous. The whisper came again. "You are being watched." Lyanna spun, torch raised. Nothing but shadows. Then the ground beneath her shifted. A slab of stone gave way, and she stumbled forward into a vast, circular chamber. The walls here were covered in glowing, bioluminescent fungi, casting an eerie blue light. And in the center, a structure. Not natural, not ancient, alien. It was a pedestal, sleek and metallic, untouched by time. Atop it floated a sphere, pulsing with a faint, rhythmic light. Vrin appeared beside her, his breath catching. This should not be here. Lyanna stepped closer. What is it? A Xerian beacon. From the first expansion. She glanced at him. Meaning? His jaw tightened. Meaning someone from my world has been here before, and they left this behind for a reason. Before she could respond, the sphere activated. A beam of light shot from it, scanning them both in an instant. Then, identity confirmed. Vrin of Xeris. Welcome back. Lyanna's blood ran cold. Back. Vrin didn't meet her eyes. The sphere pulsed again. Warning. The devourer stirs. You must leave this planet before it wakes. Then, just as suddenly as it had activated, the sphere went dark. Silence. Lyanna turned to Vrin slowly. You knew about this place. He didn't deny it. Her grip tightened on the torch. Start talking. Now, the silence in the cave was suffocating. Lyanna kept her grip on the torch, the flickering light casting sharp shadows across Vrin's face. His silver eyes avoided hers, fixed instead on the now dormant alien beacon. You knew, she repeated, her voice low. You knew this was here. Vrin exhaled, a sound almost like a sigh. It was not a certainty, only a possibility. That's not an answer. He finally looked at her, his expression unreadable. My mission was to investigate signals from this sector. Old Xerian technology emits a distinct energy signature. When our ship was pulled off course, I suspected. You suspected. Lyanna cut him off, her free hand curling into a fist. You let us wander this planet without telling me we might stumble onto your people's tech. What else aren't you saying? The air between them crackled with tension. For a moment, Vrin said nothing. Then, reluctantly, he reached into a hidden compartment of his damaged suit and withdrew a small, crystalline data chip. This contains records of the first expansion. My people explored this region centuries ago. They left beacons as warnings. Warnings about what? That devourer thing it mentioned. His fingers tightened around the chip. A creature, or perhaps a force. The records are fragmented, but it was sealed beneath this planet's crust long ago. The beacons were meant to monitor it. Lyanna stared at him, her mind racing. And you didn't think that was worth mentioning before now. I did not expect the beacon to still be active, or to recognize me. His voice dropped. My lineage carries clearance codes from the old expeditions. I did not anticipate. Complications. Complications, she nearly laughed. We're stranded on a planet with some kind of buried monster, and you're treating this like a minor oversight. Vrin's gaze hardened. Would you have believed me if I told you earlier? Your species has little trust for mine. She opened her mouth to retort, then stopped. He wasn't wrong. A noise echoed from deeper in the caves, a low, grinding rumble. The ground trembled faintly underfoot. Lyanna's pulse spiked. Was that the devourer? No. Vrin tilted his head, listening. But something is moving. We should leave. She wanted to argue, to demand more answers, but another tremor decided for her. They retreated quickly, the cave's whispers fading behind them. Dawn brought no comfort. The twin suns painted the sky in hues of blood and gold as Lyanna and Vrin hiked toward higher ground. The encounter in the cave hung between them, a wall of unspoken accusations. Lyanna broke the silence first. If that thing down there wakes up, can we stop it? Vryn didn't answer immediately. Unknown, but the beacon's activation may have drawn attention. We should prioritize repairing our comms. Off-world signals could attract rescue, or worse. Worse. Scavengers. Raiders. This sector is unclaimed territory. She grimaced. So our options are wait to die, or maybe get murdered by pirates. Fantastic. A faint smirk touched his lips. Your optimism is inspiring. Against her will, Lyanna felt a flicker of amusement. Then she sobered. We need to work together. No more secrets. Vryn met her gaze. Agreed. By midday, they'd salvaged enough wreckage from the Starhawk to attempt a makeshift transmitter. Vryn's knowledge of alien tech paired startlingly well with Lyanna's engineering skills. As they worked, she stole glances at him. The way his hands moved with precision. The quiet intensity in his eyes. Why do I shiver when he touches me? The thought came unbidden. She shoved it aside. A sudden beep from the transmitter startled her. Did we? Vryn adjusted a frequency modulator. A weak signal, but stable. If any ships pass within range, they may detect it. It was the first good news since the crash. Lyanna exhaled in relief. Then froze. A shadow passed over the suns. Not a cloud. Something massive, gliding silently overhead. Vryn went rigid. Kithari raider vessel. Lyanna's blood turned to ice. That's the worst you mentioned, isn't it? His hand closed around her wrist, urgent. We need to move. Now. They abandoned the transmitter, sprinting for the cover of the fern trees. Above, the raider ship circled like a predator scenting prey. Then, a beam of light lanced down, scanning the wreckage they'd just left. Lyanna whispered, Will they find us? Vryn's grip tightened. Not if I can help it. But as the ship began its descent, the ground beneath them shuddered. A deep, seismic groan, as if something far below had stirred. The raider ship landed with a thunderous shudder, its rusted hull groaning as it settled near the wreckage of the Starhawk. Lyanna pressed herself against the thick trunk of a fern tree, her breath coming in short, silent gasps. Vryn stood beside her, his body tense, his silver eyes tracking the figures emerging from the ship. Kithari raiders, tall, spined creatures with mottled gray skin and glowing yellow eyes. They moved with predatory grace, their clawed hands gripping plasma rifles as they fanned out, searching. One of them barked a guttural command, and the others began sifting through the debris of the transmitter. Lyanna's stomach twisted. If they found any trace of survivors, the hunt would begin in earnest. Vryn leaned close, his voice barely a whisper. They will not leave without scouring the area. We must reach higher ground. She nodded, but before they could move, the ground beneath them trembled again, this time violently. A deep, resonant groan echoed through the valley, as if the planet itself were waking from a long slumber. The raiders froze, their heads snapping toward the source of the sound. Then, the earth split. A jagged fissure tore open near the wreckage, swallowing one of the raiders whole. The others scrambled back, hissing in alarm. From the depths of the fissure, something black and shifting began to rise, a swirling mass of darkness, tendrils lashing like living smoke. Lyanna's blood turned to ice. The devourer. Vryn grabbed her arm. Run. They bolted, crashing through the undergrowth as chaos erupted behind them. The raiders opened fire, their plasma bolts searing into the emerging entity, to no effect. The devourer absorbed the energy, growing larger, more solid. A tendril lashed out, wrapping around another raider and pulling him into the abyss. Lyanna didn't look back. Her lungs burned, her legs screaming in protest as they sprinted up the rocky incline toward a ridge. Behind them, the raider ship's engines roared to life, lifting off in a desperate attempt to escape, only for a massive tendril to snatch it from the sky, dragging it down into the fissure with a deafening crunch. They reached the ridge, collapsing behind a cluster of boulders. Lyanna gasped for air, her hands shaking. What the hell is that thing? Vrin's face was grim, a remnant of the first expansion. My ancestors tried to destroy it. They failed, so they buried it instead. The ground quaked again. The fissure widened, the Devourer's form now towering over the landscape, its amorphous body blotting out the suns. Lyanna swallowed hard. Can we stop it? Vrin hesitated. There is a way. The beacon wasn't just a warning. It was a failsafe. If activated fully, it could reveal the Devourer. Then let's do it. He shook his head. It requires a Xerian biosignature to trigger. And once activated, the energy surge would be fatal to anyone nearby. Lyanna stared at him. The unspoken truth hung between them. He would have to die to save her. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Lyanna clenched her jaw. No, there's always another way. Vrin's gaze softened. Not this time. Before she could argue, a screech cut through the air. One of the surviving raiders had spotted them. And now, with the Devourer spreading destruction, it was coming straight for them, rifle raised. Lyanna reacted on instinct. She grabbed the plasma pistol at her hip and fired. The shot struck the raider in the chest, sending him sprawling. But the noise drew attention. The Devourer's mass twisted, its formless head tilting toward them. Vrin stood abruptly. Go. Get as far as you can. Lyanna grabbed his wrist. No. We're finishing this together. He looked at her, something unreadable in his eyes. Then, slowly, he nodded. The cave was closer than Lyanna remembered. They sprinted through the entrance just as the Devourer's tendrils slammed into the rocks outside, shaking the walls. The beacon still sat atop its pedestal, dormant. Vrin placed his hands on the sphere. It flickered to life, the same hollow voice echoing. Warning. The Devourer has breached containment. Activation of failsafe will result in terminal energy discharge. Lyanna's heart pounded. There has to be another way to trigger it. Something that won't kill you. Vrin's fingers tightened. There isn't. She refused to believe that. Her eyes darted around the chamber, then landed on the carvings. The spirals. The jagged lines. A thought struck her. Your biosignature activates it, right? What if you're not the only one here with alien DNA? Vrin frowned. What are you suggesting? Lyanna didn't answer. Instead, she pressed her palm against the beacon beside his. Nothing happened. Then, a pulse. The sphere's light intensified, swirling between their hands. The voice stuttered. Hybrid signature detected. Fail-safe recalibrating. Vrin's eyes widened. How? Lyanna had no answer, but the beacon was reacting, its energy stabilizing. The voice continued. Dual activation confirmed. Containment protocol engage. A blinding light erupted from the sphere, shooting upward through the cave's ceiling, a beam of pure energy that pierced the sky. Outside, the Devourer screeched, its form writhing as the beam struck it. The ground shook violently as the fissure began to close, dragging the entity back into the depths. Lyanna clung to Vrin as the cave trembled around them. Then, as suddenly as it began, the light vanished. Silence. The beacon dimmed, its task complete. The Devourer was sealed. And they were alive. 3 days later, a rescue ship arrived, drawn by the energy surge. As they boarded, Lyanna glanced back at the planet, now still and quiet. Vrin stood beside her. You should not have been able to activate the beacon, he said quietly. She met his gaze. Guess we got more to figure out. He nodded, something like hope in his silver eyes. And as the ship lifted off, Lyanna knew one thing for certain. Their story wasn't over yet.